In the energy quadrant, crude oil falling again over 1.5% down into that 53 handle. Interesting move considering a lot of the news has been to higher prices, but crude is falling from a channel breakout. So it might be just a little bit of short covering waiting for some of the factors of the polar vortex, which I'll talk about in a minute. But one of the factors that could push crude oil higher over the next few days, and we have had 3 of the last 6 days lower, just those lower days have been very small versus the rallies, which have been very big. Today's one of the larger down moves, although it's not accompanied by a lot of volume. Venezuelan sanctions actually have been priced into the market, but harsher sanctions that were implemented recently as the U.S. government recognized the defeated opposition leader in the election as the rightful president in issuing harsher sanctions and essentially choking off most of Venezuelan exports to the U.S. and elsewhere. So that's taken quite a bit more crude off the market, although Venezuela was about 70% lower than their peak in terms of their crude production. Demand weakness has been showing up a little bit. Iran is reporting that despite waivers from the U.S. sanctions, Europe specifically is not importing as much Iranian crude as they had promised or as they had in the past. That came out yesterday, so a little bit less crude oil on the market, but due to demand weakness, not due to the lack of availability of the crude oil. Same thing in China. Some of the Chinese refiners have reported bringing less crude oil in because of weaker demand of refined products on the Chinese continent. So there's some demand weakness showing through in that data. And then lastly, the EIA that comes out tomorrow might show a substantial gasoline build due to the polar vortex event. Much was made about the cold here in Chicago, but the polar vortex actually affected about 250 million Americans. Places like Texas and Florida, which didn't necessarily have freeze out or snowstorm conditions, still had much cooler than normal conditions, and locals in those particular states did not go out as much, didn't drive as much. So we could see a gasoline build. If it doesn't hit the EIA this week, it's likely to hit it next week. A lot of that could have caused some of the longs in crude oil to sell out early and wait for a basing and another snapback higher when we start to get news in terms of the compliance on the OPEC production cut.